Well, I've always said that nothing ever fits, and well, these kick panel speaker mounts, they're no exception. All right, well, here's the deal. So we're working on Curt's bug. We're actually getting the sound system kind of figured out. Wire routing, mounting the speakers, amplifier mounting, and all those little things. And I'm at the point now where I want to put the kick panel speakers in. And what I've got for speakers is just these Kenwood 6.5s. Should be a nice setup for us. But the problem I'm having is actually with these kick panel mounts. What this is, it's a fiberglass kick panel mount. Reviews said that they were all pretty good, but I'm finding that this particular set's not real great. What you'll notice here, if you look right along this edge, this should be straight. At least as far as I can tell, this should be straight in order to sit on the A-pillar. But you'll see this big curve right here, and it happens, it's not a surprise, it happens right along this seam here. So I'm guessing it was probably pulled out of the mold too soon or something like that. And it just doesn't fit flush. I imagine what you could do is you could just screw this down and it will flex enough to kind of hold down, but that's really not the best thing to do with fiberglass. You want everything to fit, and the screws and bolts are just there to hold everything together. I do have the driver's side done. You'll see I've already got the hole cut. I have had the speaker mounted, and if you look at this edge here, while it's not 100% perfect just yet, you'll see how much straighter this edge is compared to this edge. So if I put them on top of one another here, you can kind of see the difference there. And what I ended up doing here, you can kind of see some of my scratches. I just took this and I clamped it between a couple of straight edges, really just the edge of my portable workbench and a piece of steel, and then I heated all along and through here and along and through here to soften the resin enough to allow it to kind of relax. It's the same thing you would do if you were trying to take a warp out of an old used piece of fiberglass. And so we're going to end up doing the same thing. You know, if you take a look at how this fits right now, you can see just how far away from the A-pillar it is. Should be all the way flush here. That way when you put your carpet over here, there's no steps or anything. And it really just isn't great. So what we'll do now, really before we go any further, is go ahead and get this edge as straight as we can. I want to do that before I drill the hole for the speaker. The actual speaker mounting surface, you can see, has got a little bit of a warp in it, so we'll try to straighten that out as well. And once we've got the panel as straight as we can and as close to fitting as we can, then we'll go ahead and get the hole drilled, get the speaker mounted, so we can find the exact position we want to mount it, and then start figuring out how we're going to hold this in the car. So that's the quick explanation. So I think really the thing to do now is just to hop over to my little portable workbench. We'll grab the heat gun and some steel, and let's see if we can't get this warp out of this thing. All right, well, here we are. We're over at our portable workbench, and I just wanted to show you again just what this thing actually looks like. You can kind of see if I just take my steel straight edge, that if I hold this here, you can see just how warped that is there. And in fact, if I come up here where this is supposed to sit flush, this actually curls up a little bit. So we got quite a bit that we need to do here. And then if we look across the face of the speaker mount, you can see that as well has got a nice big bow to it. So we want to get that straightened out. So we need this to be straight like that. We need this guy to be straightened out like that, and then we want to try to get some of this curl out of here. So quite a bit actually that needs to be done. And what we're going to do is we're going to go in stages here. I'm going to try to straighten this flange out first. And really all we're going to do is we're just going to heat along the flange and then along this curve here, because we need it to bend down in this fashion, and just hopefully kind of relax things. And I've just got a couple of bar clamps here. We'll clamp it to the edge of this little plastic bench here, heat everything up, and hopefully that'll start to relax it. Now when I did the other one, I found that if I pull this straight and then heat it, once everything cools, it still had a tendency to spring back. So what I ended up doing is right at the apex of this bend, I just took this scrap piece of steel here and I clamped that underneath this. So I actually put a little bit more of a reverse bow in it. And that then, when it cooled, sprung back to, well, straighter. You'll notice the other one's not perfectly straight, but it's pretty good. Again, after everything is done, we'll get it mounted in the car, and we'll heat everything one last time to hopefully kind of set it in the position and conform to the car itself. So anyway, let me get this clamp down here. We'll start heating things up, and we'll get you going. All right, well here's the setup I'm going to go with. I'm going to lay this little piece of steel on the bench. We'll go ahead and place the apex of that right on this edge here, and then I'm going to lay this piece of steel across here, and then we'll just simply clamp that to the bench. Now I'm purposely letting this hang off the edge of the table so gravity can work with me to kind of straighten this flange out. If it moves too much, we can always curve it back the other way. But because it had that curl up in here, we want to try to pull some of that out. And now I'm just going to go ahead and start heating this up. So I just got my heat gun on high. And again, I'm going to heat along this curve here. And then we'll start heating along this curve here. And it's just a matter of getting all of this up to temperature. Now I can start tightening down my clamp here. Make sure this one's tight. And we just want to get this thing good and warm. Try not to melt anything. And this cheap old paint that they put on here, you can kind of see it start to wrinkle and bubble up a little bit. I don't care about that because this is all going to be covered anyway, and we'll end up probably removing most, if not all, of this. So I use that as an indicator that I'm getting the fiberglass hot enough. You know, again, it starts to kind of bubble and wrinkle a little bit, and that's a good sign for us. All right, well there we are. We got our first round of heating taken care of. So again, it's clamped to the edge of the bench. I went ahead and removed this strip of metal for the time being, just to get the shape roughed out. It started to put a little bit of a crease in there, and I didn't want to crease it, so we'll come back to this on the next step. The fiberglass is pretty warm, almost too hot to touch, but I can still put my hand on it. And again, I heated all of the curved areas that were going to potentially fight us a little bit. And now we're just going to let it sit. I'm going to give it about, I don't know, half hour, maybe an hour, and let it get all the way back down to room temperature and make sure everything is cold and as set as it can get. After that, we'll scope it out, we'll see what it looks like, and I know it's not going to be straight, but it'll be straighter, and then we can make some adjustments after that. Ultimately, what I'm going to do once I do my final adjustments here, and I'm pretty satisfied it's going to take a set, I'm going to go ahead and clamp it down, do our last heating, and I'm actually going to let it sit overnight. By doing so, it just kind of helps solidify it. Does it actually do anything? I don't know, but anytime I've straightened fiberglass in the past, if I could leave it clamped for 24 hours or stretched for 24 hours, things tend to hold a little bit better. So for now, I'm just going to let this sit. Like I said, I'll give it about a half hour, which should just be a few seconds for you, and then we'll see what it looks like. All right, well, it's been about a half hour here, and everything's cooled off, and well, let's just see how phase one did here. So I'm just going to pop these clamps, and I think I can just lift this up. There we go. And, well, better. You know, it's not straight. Again, this corner here is pretty rigid just because you've got two different corners intersecting here. So for the moment, you know, we're getting there. You know, it's a little better than it was. We're just going to have to go ahead and heat this up some more to get things going. So we're going to go ahead and just clamp it up again. So you can see here from underneath that, again, I've got my little raised portion here, and I've actually got it now bowing backwards. So hopefully when things spring back, it'll come back to somewhat straight anyway. I still have it hanging this way, so again, I'm hoping I can start to get rid of some of the curve that's in there. If this curve doesn't start to fix itself, I think what we're going to end up having to do here is clamp that between two pieces of steel just on this edge and heat that up, and hopefully get that to straighten out. If none of that works, then well, we'll just go to actual fiberglassing. We'll cut it up if we have to, and you know, do what's necessary. But for now, we'll just see what happens. So I'm going to go ahead and heat this up again. You know, nice and warm along all these curved edges that I'm trying to straighten out. You know, this speaker mounting panel did get a little flatter, so I'll heat that up again, and then, you know, try to get that a little better, and we'll just keep going. So here we go. I'm going to heat it up, let it sit for another, you know, half hour, and then we'll check it again. But, you know, I think probably doing this another 2, maybe 3 times, and we should have things where we want it. So I'm going to go ahead and get to it, finish this up, and then I'll show you the end result. All right, well, here we are. It's the next day, and well, take a look at this contraption I got put together here. We've got a couple of clamps with some scrap wood to help kind of flatten out the speaker area here. You'll notice I actually am using my camera tripod to help hold this up because of the weight of these clamps. And then if we sneak underneath here, you can see that you can just barely see that I've got a little bit of cardboard strips piled up in here to kind of raise this center portion. So we ended up really having to go after this here. Ultimately, I think I ended up heating this like 4 or 5 different times, just trying to get everything to work itself out, get nice and straight and even. And well, now it's been clamped overnight, so let's go ahead and pull this stuff off, and well, let's see how we did. If all goes well, we should be able to start fitting this to the car next. Well, it's not too bad. You can see here, if you look along the edge here, that it's actually pretty straight. It's not perfect, but I think for what it's going to be used for, it's going to be just fine. The speaker area, that actually flattened out pretty well. There's a little low spot right here, but we'll get our speaker ring out and see what it kind of looks like. And to be honest, I think it's probably all set to go. We'll do a little cleanup on this edge here because the fiberglass itself is bumpy and uneven. We'll just kind of smooth that out before we actually get everything finalized. But for now, I'm pretty happy. So let's hop over to the car now, and well, we'll see how things fit. And if all goes well, we should just be drilling some holes. So let's hop to it. All right, well, let's see how we did, huh? So if I lay the panel up in here, kind of pull it back to where it's gonna live, it's really not too bad. There's a low spot right here in the actual sheet metal, and it's a little hard to see. I'll see if I can get you up a little closer. But this is actually from the original carpet that was in here. There's carpet tacks that held this in, and it's dented in. Both sides had the exact same thing. So I have to do a little bit of sheet metal work here. What we'll do is we'll just use a slide hammer to help pull this out, and I'm going to have somebody else hold a dolly on the back side, and hopefully we can get this, well, straighter. Ultimately, it's not going to be a big deal because there will be carpet that's going to cover this, and it will hide a lot of these sins that we're, well, just not going to go after. But for now, I'm pretty happy with that. So I think the next step is to go ahead and get a hole drilled in here, get our speaker mounted, because that way we can find the exact position we want this, because we don't want the speaker to be running into anything back here. And once we've got that mounted up, then we'll just figure out where we're drilling our holes and driving this home. So, all right, well, here we go. So now it's time to go ahead and get this speaker located within the panel here. And I have the driver's side laying out here. I've got them reversed just so I can put them side by side. And what we'll do here, I'm just going to get rid of the screens for now. Set these off to the side. And you'll notice that if I lay this speaker on here and get the holes lined up, pretty darn close anyway. You see I've got the speaker down almost all the way down to the bottom of this little flat spot here where it curves off, and then also off to the right just before it starts to curve around. I wanted them as close as I could, but still looking decent. So if we hop over to the passenger side here, we're going to do the exact same thing. Really all we want to do is make sure that we get it oriented properly this way, so the Kenwood symbol is going to be level once it's in the car. First things first, I'm going to lay out some tape here and use that to help me kind of find my location. All right, well, now that I've got this all laid out here and kind of figured out, I don't need the driver's side for right now, so we'll set that off to the side. I don't need these boxes. I was just using these for stands to hold things up. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drill a pilot hole here. We'll use that to help center up the hole saw that we're going to be using. So I've just got a small drill bit. We'll find our little center dot here, and all right, there we go. So now that we've got this taken care of, I don't need this tape anymore. It was just used to help locate the speaker. We'll get rid of that. We'll put some more out later when we go to mark our other holes, but that's good enough for the moment. And now it's time to go ahead and get our hole saw out and drill our hole. So let's reposition here, grab the hole saw, and get our hole going. All right, so I'm repositioned here to the corner of my little portable workbench, and you can see there's a big hole here. We'll use that to clear the center of the drill. You can actually see where I cut through when I drilled the driver's side one, and you know, I don't really care about this table, so it's going to be fine. What we have here is a 5-inch hole saw, and that is the correct size for the speakers that I'm using. And this little relief right here, that is just under 5 inch. So this is the exact size we want. You know, after we drill it, we may have to come and do just a little bit of cleanup just to make sure everything drops in nicely. But I know that when I put the speaker in here, it has a little bit of side-to-side room, and there's plenty of space for my little J nuts that are going to hold it in place. So now we're just going to go ahead and get this cut out. And there we are. We are all the way through. I I pop this guy out. Little hanger here. Just go ahead and break that off. And there's our hole. So I'm going to go ahead and clean up this dust. I'm going to do that now before it spreads throughout the garage here, and then we'll continue on. All right. Well, now it's time to go ahead and get the holes located for the actual speaker mount here. And what we're going to do is I have the driver's side here. I went ahead and just fastened this ring on with just a couple of screws. That gives me the proper orientation, the way it's clocked here. And I'm just going to take my passenger side panel and I'm going to set that at basically the same angle here. We're just going to kind of look at how straight that is versus how straight that is, and that basically puts me right about there. And then we'll just go ahead and orient this, and the parallax from the camera makes them look like they're not even, but they are in fact even. So we can see that this one here is level, and now we get this one level. And now I'm just going to center that ring over the hole that mounts the speaker. And with everything leveled up here now, just to make this a little easier for myself, I'm going to take just a transfer punch. I'm going to slide that down. It fits nice and snug to the hole, and I'm just going to press on that. That's going to give me a little mark in my tape, and that's going to show me where this is supposed to be located. Now, real quick, I'm just going to pop this in the car just to make sure it actually is sitting level when this is lined up in the car. Okay, after a verification test fit in the car, this is in fact sitting level, so I am pretty happy with that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and drill just this hole, and then we'll secure the ring temporarily. I'm going to drill the hole a little undersized and just use a wood screw to hold it in the fiberglass, and then we'll use that then to locate the opposite hole. And same thing, we'll get that drilled, screwed temporarily, and then we should be able to mark the last two and we should be set. So let me drill this first one. Just a regular wood screw here, and run this in. This is not a real strong hold, but it is strong enough to get through the next couple of steps here. So now I can use that to guide me. So we'll just go ahead and get this ring centered up. That looks good. Go back to my transfer punch. That'll drop straight down. And now we'll just mark the location again. And there it is. I don't know if you can see that little depression there, so I'll just go ahead and drill that hole out. And there we go. Our ring is now centered up, looking pretty good. One last test fit in the car, and if it passes that, then I can go ahead and mark and drill these last two holes. All right, we are almost ready to put the speaker in. The last thing I want to do now is go ahead and get my J-nuts installed. And this is what's actually going to hold the speaker in place. A couple things we need to do. One, this hole size for the speaker is not quite large enough to allow these to come all the way over. So we're going to cut some reliefs in there. And then the second thing we're going to do is we're going to drill this hole out larger, just to give this a little bit of wiggle room to make sure we get things lined up. So first we're going to drill holes to a larger size. So I got drill the hole size in the jig itself. We'll just go ahead and drill these out now. All right. So with our holes drilled here, we'll do some test fitting with our J-nuts. I'll slide this one on, and I can see that this goes on much further than is necessary. so it does clear that hole, so I would call this one good. We'll slide this guy on here, and it doesn't quite make it to the hole. So we're gonna come in here and we're just gonna relieve this just a little bit. But we might as well check all of them while we're at it here. This one here. This one, same thing. We're gonna have to relieve it just a little bit to make sure that this will come all the way over. And then finally, this guy. This one also needs some relief. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to take my silver Sharpie here, and I'm just going to mark the location of these J-nuts. It's just those that need to be done, so this is one we don't have to worry about. And now we can go ahead and bring this back just a little bit. So pull these off. And I'm just going to use a die grinder here just to open this stuff up a little bit. I don't know if I can do this so you all can see it. And we don't have to go far. That should be enough. We'll scope this out, and yep, sure enough, this goes a little bit further than it needs to, so we know that that one's good to go. So I'm just going to take care of these last two, make sure these J-nuts fit, and then we'll go ahead and we'll get our speaker bolted in here and then go test fit in the car. And there we have it. We got everything screwed down, holes lined up exactly the way we want it. Everything's nice and secure. These are not the screws we'll be using at the end. We will use the black hardware that was included with the kit, but for temporary in and out, we'll just continue with these. So really, let's hop over to the car now and see how things line up. All right, well, here we go. Let's slide this up into place, and if right about here is where it looks the best, and I've already gone ahead and I marked my location and just took a Sharpie and wrote that on here. If I already had a painted car, I just would have laid some masking tape down first. But so now, if I slide this down, right here is where the speaker starts to touch the metal. So I have about an inch gap here, about an inch gap here. So I know that when I slide this up to this position where it really fits the best, that my magnet is kind of sitting in this little pocket right here, not actually contacting any metal. So I know I'm not going to have any interference issues there. And so that really appears to be the best location. So again, speaker touches there. If I slide it up to here, we're actually sitting pretty good. So I'd say we have this figured out here. So now I'm going to go ahead and remove the speaker, because again, I've marked my location there, so I know that's where my panel is going to sit. So I can pop the speaker out. It'll make it a little easier to handle this kick panel, and then we can go ahead and start marking and locating where we're going to drill our holes, and we'll get those drilled. And there's a couple of issues here with the way this panel was made, so we're going to have to deal with that here, but we'll get to that in a second. So I'm going to go ahead and pop this speaker out and slide this panel in place, figure out where we're going to put our mounting holes, and we'll get going. All right, well, off camera here, I went ahead and straightened this out as much as I can get it straight anyway. So what I ended up having to do is I used the body puller, I drilled a couple holes, and used that to pull the sheet metal out, and then I had somebody hold a dolly on the inside so I could tap this back flat and kind of smooth everything out. So now we can go ahead and get our holes drilled and get our mounts in place. And I went ahead and I measured the screw locations on the other panel, and I just transferred those over. I just simply used an adjustable square to mark the location in, and then I measured up to mark the location up. And so I've got these two holes marked, and now it's really just time to go ahead and drill our mounting holes here. And the rear one, we'll get to that in just a second here, but for now I'm just going to hold this guy in place where I want it to be. And again, that's the location right there. And now I can just run my drill in. That should mark that hole for us. That should put it in a good spot. And now I can just go ahead and drill through. Now, I see here that my mark is right up at the edge of this seam here, and I'm not going to be using sheet metal screws here. We're going to be using something else, and so I don't want it up that high. So I'm going to make the call in real time here to just drop this down to make sure I'm within this region here. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm just going to drop this down about a quarter inch. Should give me enough room here, and give that a little punch right there. And dropping this down is not going to make any difference in how things fit. I'm not worried about it up top. So we'll just go ahead and drill this through now. There we are. All right, well, here's what we're going to do to mount this up. I really don't want to be using sheet metal screws. That's what most people are using. I don't like the fact that every time you run a screw in and out, it distorts the material even more. So I'm going to opt to go with riv nuts. And you've probably seen me use these before on other aspects of this car. But I really like having the machine thread in there, so I know I can take the panel off and put it back on without worrying about stretching out the metal anymore. So what we're going to use now is it's a 4mm riv nut for a 4mm screw. I've already sized it up. It's a 230 thousandths drill bit. So now I have my pilot hole here, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drill that out. And I've got my riv nut installer here. We'll go ahead and get this pressed in place, and then well, we'll get at least the top screw in. That'll let us help locate the lower screw, but I mentioned earlier there's a problem with these panels, and we're going to have to fix that. But for the moment, we'll at least get this top screw in, and then we'll get the back screw located and get that in, and then we can kind of go from there. So let's get this drilled out and get this riv nut installed. After I get these drilled, I do like to make sure that there's no extra burrs of metal, so I've just got my little swivel deburring tool here. Lets me kind of reach into the back side and cut away any burrs that may have popped up there. And then I'll go ahead and do the same on the front. Get rid of that. I'm just going to feel in the back here. I just checked the back side and the burrs disappeared there, so we're good to go. So now we'll just go ahead and get this installed. I'll just thread it up. Now I'm actually going through 2 layers of metal here because this is a lap joint, so I'm gonna back this off just the amount of the second piece of metal, just so I don't strip anything out or damage the riv nut. So we'll get that pressed in place, and now we'll just give this a squeeze. All right, that is nice and tight. Go ahead and back this off now. And I'm going to have to drill the hole out here in the panel so my screw can go through. Increase the size of that there. I don't have the screws I'm going to be using in the end here, but I do just have these little Allen headed screws, and they'll be fine for mock-up and testing today. But I can go ahead and thread this up. And now I can swing my panel up into place here. Go ahead and secure this. And there it is. It's holding in place, and you can see this did drop down just a little bit, but again, it's not gonna impact what we're trying to accomplish here. We'll just get this all lined up here, and now we can just go ahead and drill our rear hole, because I want this to be held fast, and then we'll worry about what we're going to do with this guy here. Alright, so I got my rear hole drilled here. Now what we're going to do temporarily is I am just going to be using a sheet metal screw. I just want to get this held in place so I can locate all my other holes. In the end, I am not going to be using this, but I'm also not going to be using a riv nut here. My plan, because this actually goes into the fender well, what I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to just take a screw, and I'm going to run that in from the outside, and I'm actually going to weld that to the fender well. That way it'll be a sealed hole. We don't have to worry about any kind of water intrusion there. Then when I go to assemble this, I can just slide my panel on there, run a nut on, and that's going to hold it in place. We won't get to that here today because I don't have the right screws to use there. I need to get something that's a little bit shorter than what I have, and that will actually end up being a 5mm, just to make sure I've got a large enough washer on there to hold this panel. So again, for today I'll use a sheet metal screw, and then later, once we get the fender back off, then we'll weld a stud in there. And there we have it. So now we are held fast in the back, we're held fast in the top. Well, now I think we're at a good point to show you one of the problems I'm dealing with these panels. I'm going to go ahead and mark the outside location in black marker here. So this is my middle hole, and then I haven't located a bottom one yet, but I think that's probably going to be somewhere right about there. And I'm going to go ahead and pop this panel back off here. So if I pop this off, this isn't going to be the easiest to see. My hole is in about a 1/2 inch from this edge. And if we look at where the panel is here, if I go in a 1/2 inch, this is actually starting to taper away from this flat edge. So the issue is if I drill my hole, it's going to be over here, and there's going to be a huge air gap between the back side of the kick panel and here. And we don't want to have that, because we don't want to be stressing this any more than is necessary. When I put this back up in place here, I have the same problem at the bottom. Again, it's way off of the actual flat surface here. So what we end up with having this starting to taper back, if I hold this up here, it sits about like this, and there's going to be a gap between the back side of the panel where the screw is and the actual sheet metal. And I don't want to just run a screw in there and try to tighten up on that. We want to actually have this be pinched. So after doing some thinking, what I've determined the thing to do is, I don't want to modify the car, because if these ever come out and just get replaced with carpet, we still want to have this be a flat surface. And I'm just quite simply going to build up the back side of this panel right where the screw is. I'm just going to build that up with some fiberglass. So should be a pretty easy job. What we'll do is I'll clean up this paint. I'm just going to put a couple layers on here to taper this back. A little too thick's not a big deal. Then we'll come in and we'll hit this with a sander to smooth that out until it actually sits flush against the steel. And I'll do that both top and bottom. And with that fiberglass laid up in place, then when I drill my hole into the sheet metal, I know that I'm going to get a good solid bond here. So now we got to hop back over to the workbench here, and we got to start doing some fiberglassing. So I'm going to get some measurements taken care of here. Just give me an idea of how thick this needs to be. It shouldn't take much. It looks like less than 1/4 inch, but I'll get the amount figured out. We'll throw some layers on there, and then then we can finish up. All right, well, here's what I know. I've gone ahead and cleared away some of this black paint that was on here, so I have someplace clean for the fiberglass to stick to. And I did some checking and some measuring, and it looks like in the middle here, we need to taper this up and back roughly 1/4 inch. So that'll give us the thickness we need. Down here at the bottom, it was quite a bit more. It was closer to 1/2 inch. You know, so again, it's going to need to be tapered back in order to contact the body correctly. So what we're going to do here is just with some fiberglass mat and some resin is I'm just going to build up some layers. We'll probably, put a layer on there, step it back, put a second layer on, and just keep going until we get the thickness we want. And then we'll, kind of smooth things out as we go. Once I've got my layers on there, then we'll just simply sand it to fit the body, get the contour correct there, and then we should be good to go. Now, to make this a little easier on myself, I'm not going to do both locations at the same time. I'm going to start with the middle one. We'll get that built up and then fit to the body. Then we'll come back and do the second location. We'll build that up. Then we can fit that to the body. By separating the two, it should just be a little bit easier. Take a little bit longer, but at least I can get one to fit without the other one interfering. Trying to do both at the same time can just be more frustrating than it's worth. So at this moment, I'd rather it take a little bit longer to make sure I can get this fit the way I want it. So without further ado, I'm going to grab my fiberglass resin and mat here, and let's just start building stuff up. All right, here we go. I think I am ready to start layering up here. And what I've done is I've already gone and pre-cut all of the pieces I'm going to be attaching here, and I've got them laid out in the order I'm actually going to be attaching them. I'm going to do both the middle on the passenger side and also the lower on the driver's side at the same time, one batch of resin. At least get those two done at the same time. And we're just going to be using this this Bondo brand fiberglass resin. This is non-structural, non-cosmetic, so I'm not too worried about what I'm using. So we're going to go with that just to keep the cost down just a little bit. And really, we're just going to mix up a small batch following the instructions on the can. I will just use a disposable chip brush to paint some on, lay my fiberglass in place, mat that down, and then I'm just going to keep layering. Most likely on this one it won't be enough. I'll have to add another layer, but I'm not too concerned with that. I don't want it to get too thick all on the first go here. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to throw my respirator on. I've got the exhaust fan running, and let's start layering up some fiberglass.
All right, well, I think that's a good place to stop for right now. Everything is too loose and moving around too easily to layer it up as thick as I need it to be. And I just don't want it to be too thick when it starts to cure. So we're going to let this stuff set up now. Instructions say it takes about 2 hours. So, well, we'll just let it sit for 2 hours. And then, you know, it's not the cleanest job in the world, as you can see, but that's the beauty of fiberglass. It doesn't have to be right off the bat. A lot of it's just going to get cut away anyway. So we'll just let this go. Once everything hardens up, I'll just clean out this cup and well, let's see what round 1 does. So I will be back in 2 hours. I'll see you in a second.
All right, it's been a couple of hours here. Everything seems to have set real nice. You can see my chip brush is rock hard, and here's the puck of the remaining material. I had a miss pour, and I poured way more than I needed, but whatever. But this is nice and firmed up, so I know that my mix was good, so I'm confident that we're gonna have a good bond here. And I'll tell you what, looks pretty good. If you kind of sight along this edge, you can see how it tapers up. That should match the steel pretty decently. The next step is just to hop over to the car, and we'll start doing some fitting. I have an idea on what I want to do here to kind of test it and see where things are contacting and not. We'll see how that goes. But really, it should just be a matter now of doing some sanding here to get this to contour correctly, and then well, then we can drill through, get our screw mounted, and then we'll come down and work on the other one. All right, well, let's see how we did here. I set this up in place and kind of get it lined up with my upper screw hole here. And actually it's looking not too bad. You can see that it's in fact pivoting on the lump that I have here. Not too worried about that. Truthfully, that's exactly what we wanted for this stage in the game. So I'm going to go ahead and slip my upper screw in here, get my screw in the back, get that put in place, and now that's just going to kind of hold this where it belongs. And now we need to figure out where this is contacting. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take some emery cloth here. I got a strip that's 150 grit. I'm just going to slip this in behind our heavy spot and just go ahead and give that a few pulls. And you know what? Actually, right off the bat here, it actually did a pretty decent job of knocking this down. So let's just take a peek now and see what it actually looks like on the inside. Pop that screw out. So now if I flip this around, you can actually see where it's sanded. So we're really not too far off. What I'm going to do now is just go ahead and I'm going to hit this with my die grinder here and actually just smooth this out, taper it right out to this actual edge here, and just kind of clean some of this stuff up. And I'll tell you what, it shouldn't take a whole lot more than that. Well, there we have it. This actually sat down really quickly, really nicely.
I am super happy with that. Now I did notice that this edge that we spent all that time straightening out has started to actually curl back up, which doesn't surprise me. The heat from all the fiberglass resin we put on here probably just softened it back up. But we'll come in and we'll get some fiberglass on this lower edge, get that fit, and then we can do some final straightening at the end here. But right now, well, I tell you what, that's pretty nice. Well, and there it is. You can see all the sanding marks from where I was dragging the sandpaper across, and it's nice and even. Looks like it's you know, my hole is dead center in this flat spot, so I know I've got good contact there. So yeah, I'm pretty stoked with that. All right, well, that's looking pretty good. I think we're making some good progress here. I'm going to go ahead and pop this panel back off, get back over to the bench, layer up some fiberglass on this lower edge to get that ready for fitting. And well, really, I think I'm just going to go ahead and just get everything fit and taken care of now, and then I'll just show you the end result. All right, here we are. Got it all finished up. Off camera here, I went and got the lower side all taken care of. Again, you can see just how much we had to build up here in order to get the full contact. And well, it actually fits pretty nice. A couple of things I did have to do here, because the screws are actually going in at an angle now. You'll notice that there's a cutaway here and a cutaway here. That is to allow the screw to go in 90 degrees to the screw hole, but then still sit flush on the fiberglass itself. That way everything is going to be pinched nice and tight, and there's not going to be any gaps in there. But all in all, pretty simple job, just really messy. After I got all this sanded and working, and I cleaned up some of the mess that I created in the backside, there was just dust everywhere. And you know, I went ahead, cleaned up as best I could, at least in the short term here. But I figured now would be a great time to go ahead and get a speaker mounted. I got the driver's side all done as well, so I'm going to mount a speaker in that. And well, I'm just going to go ahead and get these things plugged in here and show you the end result. So just give me a second. I'll bring you back when I got everything mounted up. All right, well, there it is installed, and everything's pretty secure here. So we got the 3 screws holding the front edge on, and I know that they suggest just 2 screws, but man, I just don't think that's enough. I really want to make sure this is held fast. I do have the 1 screw in the back, and then the only thing I don't like right now, and I'm going to have to decide on this later, but the top is awfully loose here. You know, there's just no support between this screw and this screw, and I don't know, I'm not crazy about that. I'm going to think on it. I may actually just come in and put a tab right back here that attaches to the underside of the firewall here, and then, you know, another screw to hold that, just to stiffen it up a little bit more. I'm going to make that decision later. I'm going to go ahead and call this done for the moment. I'm going to get things wired up. I'll get the stereo wired up, and let's just see how things sound. In the end, when I put this together for the last time, I will be putting foam around all the metal contact points, just to make sure there's no vibration or rattles that way. And then another issue that I have, again, I haven't decided what I'm going to do about this yet, but with the panel up where I wanted it, so the speaker's up as high as I could get it, there's a great big gap between the bottom of the panel and the heater channel. And I haven't decided if I'm going to try to fill that. If I don't fill it, my thinking is that when I have the carpet on here, it's just, you know, there's nothing to attach it to. It's just going to be loose. So we may come in here and actually just fiberglass in an extension just to contact the floor carpet and just kind of clean everything up. But again, I'm going to worry about that later.
I do have a few more tricks up my sleeve, some secrets that I'm not going to reveal at this time. We'll reveal that later when we get closer to the end of this project, so that'll probably be a couple of months before we get there, but I think you're going to like that. But for now, you take a peek, you know, that's the passenger side, and then if we just rotate over to the driver's side, I got that one mounted. You know, I don't have the screens in right now because I don't want to have to pry those back out. But all in all, not a bad look. I think it's pretty slick. The speakers are up high enough. I'm not worried about, you know, easily getting kicked. You know, the panels, you know, now they actually fit pretty decent. You can see there's still a little bit of a curl here, but we'll heat this up one last time. You know, I'll take the speaker out, screw the panel down tight, and heat the whole thing to let it kind of set into the car. But that's it's not a bad result. And there we are, all wrapped up. That was quite a lengthy process for something that was supposed to be a pretty easy install, and again, had pretty good reviews. I like the fact that I have the fiberglass kick panels. They're stiffer. Hopefully they'll hold the speaker a little bit better, but boy, they just didn't fit real well. Now I know this car's got some damage, but that's definitely not what was causing this issue. It's just these panels just weren't made quite correctly. I think some of the changes we made, they're going to be a lot better for it in the long run. Using the riv nuts and machine screws as opposed to sheet metal screws like they recommend, that's a good peace of mind for me, because again, I can take it in and out as many times as I want. The stud that I will eventually be welding in the back to hold on the well, I guess it's the front, to hold on that, again, because I'm going into the wheel well, I don't want anything protruding into the wheel well. Plus it's a wet area, so I don't want, you know, water infiltrating, you know, through that screw hole. So we'll weld the stud in there. We'll seam seal it so we don't have any water problems there. But I'm going to wait on that until I take the front fenders back off. But, you know, for the rest of it, I think it turned out real well. You know, not a day project. It ended up being a 2-day project, you know, with the amount of fiberglassing that I had to do and waiting, and then the heating and straightening out the warped panel. That was, you know, I guess that's just part of the job. So that's it. I think I'm just going to cut it off right here. I'm glad you made it to the end here. Thanks for hanging out, and well, really, till the next one, I'll see you around.